Welcome to Busy Living Sober. Busy Living Sober. Busy Living Sober with Jamie Andrews, kind of like Julia Andrews, but it's Jamie Andrews, and she's the author of The Brink, as in the brink of disaster. Oh my gosh. How many of us feel like we're always at that brink of disaster in our lives that we're like, okay, I don't think I can take any more. It's so overwhelming. I'm at this place that if I keep going, I think I could drown. But I think if I ask for help, I'm too scared. I'll break into a million pieces. Here I am. Now what? And going out there and changing and doing something to get yourself out of the disaster takes time, and it takes work, and it takes a journey. And I thank you for sharing your story with everyone, because I think I was just actually telling my girlfriend that's over, I said, it takes a lot of courage to be authentic, to be out there and saying, all right, I'm going to stand in front of you and I'm going to show you everything, every bump, every lump, every pain. I'm going to be me. And I'm just going to pray that I can help one person. Right.
Yes. Yes. And it's funny that you said break into a million pieces, because I actually wrote this after reading Million Little Pieces. Do you remember that by
Of
James
course.
Gray?
Mhm.
Well, there was that big scandal that it wasn't true, that
Right.
he made stuff up. And I'm like, you want a story? You want a real story? I'm going to write this. You're not going to believe this. Well, so that means I did, in fact, write it 20 years ago. And like you said, it took 20 years to build the courage to actually put it out, because I almost put it out. I had interest in publishing it 20 years ago, and I said I wanted to do it anonymously. And
Wow.
and the agent, who's a big fancy agent now, was like, we're not going to do that. We sell the person as well as the book. So I said no, because I'm an actor. I didn't want it getting in the way of my acting career. It's kind of scandalous, I'm not gonna lie. So I finally, I've reached a point in my life that I'm like, I wrote this, I'm not gonna sit on it anymore. Like you said, I hope it could help people. And I'm proud of what I've overcome.
Well, you should be. You should be, because I think for so long the shame becomes so big. It becomes so overwhelming. It's like a wall that goes in front of us. It's literally like a steel wall. And you're like, oh my gosh, I have all this shame and I can't get through it. And I can't get past
Mhm.
it. And it does take time, doesn't it?
It takes so much time, but ultimately you realize how much different a person you are, that you're operating as a completely different person under those circumstances. And when you rebuild yourself, I don't recognize the person in this book at all. I'm like, how could who I like, my husband thinks I'm like a nun. I don't do anything wrong. Like I can't eat a cherry in the grocery store, like without bringing the pit up to the cashier. So it's just crazy, because I had no limitations in my youth, and I'm so grateful for everything that brought me back from that. Partially was myself.
Right. And with the help of, maybe if you believe in a higher power, but we're going to start at the beginning.
Mhm.
So, where did you grow up? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I grew up on Long Island in New York, and I never fit in there. I was always kind of cast out. I was, what they call a gifted kid. And so, got made fun of for being a nerd. I always just had a target on my back. Um, and it got very overwhelming. It got very overwhelming for me. And, it started in middle school. I'd come home and just scream and cry. And by the time I hit 15, there wasn't even any peer pressure. It was like, there were drugs, I want to try that. Drinking, I want to try that. Anything to deaden this incredible pain of existence that I felt. And I think a lot of your listeners will agree that at first it does seem like it helps. I stopped crying every day after school because I was getting high every day after school. And, ultimately that's not the better decision, because it snowballs into, something else entirely. Um, but I always was an actor. I always did children's theater. That was a lot of what saved me. I had a friend who stayed seriously using for a long time after I did, and she said, "You're so lucky. You have something you're passionate about that said, I don't want to do this anymore. I need to be this person." Also, my older sister was 6.5 years older than me, and she got cancer. And so I had stopped the serious stuff and was just smoking pot. And then I remember going to the hospital every day and feeling like weed hangover. And I'm like, I want to be present for her. And so then I stopped that too. So, whatever it takes to get you out of your circumstances, sometimes it'll surprise you. Because I actually I didn't do the healing. So years later, I wound up smoking pot again and did it every day for another 15 years until 2 years ago. I was making this movie called Division. And all of a sudden I'm like, I don't want this anymore. It's so strange. I haven't touched it since. And I was like obsessive about it. So I mean, there are little miracles that pull us out of where we've been, and I'm so grateful. And my friend who was out using a lot longer than me, she went and got 2 master's degrees, has 2 gorgeous kids. So, there's hope for all of us, no matter where we've been.
And I love that you talked about miracles because I think sometimes we think, at least for me, like a miracle has to be like the Taj Mahal, like a pyramid in Egypt, right? Something that's such a miracle. But when these miracles and these things that happen in life that I don't like to call coincidences, they're definitely, for me, when I first got sober, somebody gave me a book called God's Little Winks. And I'm like, there's another wink. There's another wink. Oh my gosh, there's another wink.
Mm.
And if we're awake, we can see them, right?
Yes, I love that. Oh, see, chills again. That's a little
So
wink.
that's a little wink. It's a little wink. And I would imagine that being a child actor is, though, even though you've been doing it since you were young, that comes with a lot of feelings as well. Like that need to perform and that need to do a good job and that need for the applause.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, there's there's a lot of psychology that goes into wanting to be a performer. Pay attention to me, love me. Uh, Me and my friends will freely admit that. But there's also, yeah, a lot of pressure, a lot of rejection, which I think, when after my sister passed after several years,
Mm.
um, initially I was like, I'm really putting everything into doing acting for her. Like, I'm going to really go after my dreams because she couldn't. But several years later, when I actually made my living as an actor, which is what I thought I always dreamed of, there's an isolation to that too. And that's when I wound up smoking pot again. And it's there is a lot of pressure and isolation to it. I'll keep it at that. It's not an easy field. It's not for the faint of heart. Um, but it's what I love doing.
And it's your passion and never giving
Yes.
up on that. And I'm so sorry about losing your sister. That must have again been, as human beings, we have all these things that happen to us. And it's like we tend to sometimes, especially when we're in those dark times, look at other people and go, oh my gosh, their life looks so easy. It's
Hmm.
so they don't have anything going on. Look at they've got the perfect spouse. And then with social media just takes it to the next level that you're like, oh my gosh, they're doing everything right. And what
Yes.
we do with these feelings. So 20 years ago, you sat down and you said, I'm going to write my story. You had read this farce that somebody had written a million little pieces, and you wrote your story and you let it sit for how long?
20 years. It's
20
literally been
years.
20 years. I moved to LA. I didn't have enough money for a social life, so I just sat and I didn't know anyone yet. So I just sat in my room and it poured out of me. It took only 2 or 3 months. And I was going to write the entirety of my story, because the whole thing's been weird, Busy, let me tell you. Uh, and I
Tell me.
found
I love to hear the weird. Come and tell us the weird. We want to hear the weird.
Well, I realized, I had, 250, 300 pages after, and I had only gotten to age 17. So I'm like, "Oh, no, there's more than one book here." And I mentioned that in the preface. Um, I don't know if there are answers in this book. There are relatable stories. There are, she came out of that okay, so I could be okay. But there are, it's not a guidebook unless you count what not to do. Because frankly, it took another book for me to get myself together. It seemed like the first part of my recovery journey is at the end of the book. Spoiler alert. I mean, we know how these books go, but it actually got much, much worse for me. And I think I'm going to shock a lot of people. I've already shocked a lot of people who didn't, who know me well, but didn't know this part of my past because I hide it very well. But
But we
I'm not ashamed of it.
right, but for so long we do hide it. We hide who we
Hmm.
are because again, the shame that we both have mentioned in here already today. It's just been the shame that keeps us in this darkness, that keeps us
Hmm.
alone, that keeps us scared. The fear is so debilitating, isn't it? It's just so scary.
Oh yeah, if they knew what I was, would they still like me? But the thing is, what we've been through and overcome makes us so much more admirable.
Exactly. So
You
we
know, something to be proud of.
and we have to help other people. I think that we're put on this planet to help others, right?
I love that. Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
we don't want, I mean, that when I started this podcast, 6+ years ago, my whole mission has only been if I could just have one person listen to this podcast and know they're not alone and that I've been there and you can do this. You got
Hmm.
this. You got this. We're here cheering you on. We are your cheerleaders and you might not see us, but we are in our homes cheering for you that you get this and you don't have to go through the pain we went through.
Yes,
And
yes.
I hate to admit this, but I never got your book and I don't know why. But
Oh, shoot, I'll resend it to you.
please do. I would love it because I didn't get it. But I want you to tell me, and I don't want you to spoil it because I want people to go out there and I want them to read it. But I'm going to ask you some questions that just inspire me. So, when was the first time you picked up a drink or a drug?
I remember my parents had a bar in the basement, the old 1970s bar in the basement. And I'm gonna guess I was 12 when I went back there and tried something.
Were you by yourself?
No, I think the neighbors were over.
The
And I mean, it was a
neighbors, the
skip and
neighbors,
it's always the neighbors.
those neighbor kids.
So funny. Yeah.
So the
Um,
neighbors come over and they're like, let's go do this because they dare us to do these things that we're like, of course, and especially if there's someone that's like a year older or like even 6 months older, you're like, okay,
mhm.
they're gonna
Oh
dare me.
yeah. Yeah, no, it was definitely middle school because then someone's older sister got them wine coolers. How 80s is that? There were wine coolers. And we drank those and invited boys over, and it got scandalous because it was me and I bring the scandal 24/7. Um, and then the first time I drank in public, it was a spectacular debacle, which is in the book. Made myself a little famous in my high school, not for the usual reasons. Now I'm just addicted to tea.
And what did your parents do?
Ah, the night I got really drunk throwing up and got taken home, my mom was hysterical, not laughing. She was very upset, and my dad was laughing like, "Ah, kids will be kids," you know? Um, I love them, but they did not know how to deal with me. I was out of control in so many ways. So, when I was bringing home pot in my bag, my mom would just steal my pot and steal my bowl. She wouldn't confront me about it. So I'd just go buy another one. I'm like, "Mom, you're really just wasting money. This is silly." But uh without being confronted on it, how could I take it seriously, you know?
I think it's really interesting being parents now today. Now my kids are in their 20s. So
Mhm.
I've kind of missed, I mean, I'm past, I've already been there with the pot and the everything else with my kids, right? I've already the drinking, everything else. But I think back to when I was a kid and I started drinking at 13 and
Mm.
and I graduated high school in 1987. So we still had a smoking lounge, we
Wow.
still had, you could smoke at school and be outside with everybody smoking cigarettes. It was like a totally different time than it is now.
Yes.
And there were no resources for the mom that was out there to go, okay, this is where my child is right now. And I am like freaking out, right? Like I am freaking out. And there were no, and moms weren't going over with, with their Tupperware saying, okay, Sally, do you want to sit down and have a conversation about our kids? And let's be truthful. It was no, it was more competitive thing, like, right?
Yes, I absolutely remember that. I remember that with our neighbors across the street. So what is Jamie doing now? Uh-huh. All
Uh-huh.
right. Like judgy. You're so right. That era just, and even my mom will not read this book. She already lived it, but that generation very much swept everything under the rug. And I think that's why we were left with these big feelings and this generational trauma that hadn't been dealt with. And so we all, went a little mad, us Gen Xers.
I totally agree. And I feel like, and for so long, at least for me, I wanted to carry around this thing like that my mom was so shitty. My dad was so shitty. They didn't do what I needed. I didn't get what I needed as a child. And the older I get, I recognize like through all these times and these generations in front of us, it wasn't like they had what we have. They were like building and like putting in like our grandparents, like I know my
Hmm.
grandparents started an industry that's still around, like started in an industry that's still around. But it's
Wow.
like they made roads and the cities weren't like they are today. Like world was not, there was like 80 billion television stations. I mean, there was like three. And
Yeah.
there wasn't any self-help. It was like they were the first generation. It was in 1967 when they came out and they said, okay, women, you can actually partake in working and stuff, and you can go buy a house yourself. So you can imagine now, I think back because history is so important, I believe, at least, because it shows us what it was like. And now our kids, we're going to do the exact opposite of what our parents did with us. I don't know. Do you have children?
I don't know. I've struck out on my own on that accord.
What does that mean? You struck out alone?
I don't mean I struck out like in baseball. I mean, I struck out on my own like a valiant warrior of childlessness. I think there's a lot of us now that are making that choice. And uh, with my mental health struggle, I think I was too worried to pass that on, too worried that I wouldn't be a good mother. Although I do a podcast every week with Daniel Baldwin,
Yes.
and he was like, he saw me with his kid because he has a new baby.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Oh
and
my
he
gosh. Congratulations, Daniel.
yeah, and he's like, you would be a great mom. And it makes me sad because I do love kids, but I'm also kind of selfish and kind of lazy and hate repetitive actions like packing and unpacking kids into a car. I think I'd lose my mind.
Oh my God, the dishes are never done and the laundry's never finished and you're
Oh,
never
forget
done
it.
vacuuming. It's so monotonous and
And
it's what
having
I
to
do.
wake up early and having to
Oh,
drive everywhere.
oh yeah, it's a job. It's a job, but and
Yeah.
it's a thankless job, right? It's so
Yeah.
thankless. And I was just actually talking to my friend also about this. I was saying, isn't it interesting that in life, the mom, the guy who wins the award, unless they're in high school, but if they're in, big athlete, they go out and they say, I thank my wife, she's so great. And you're like, wait a minute, where's that mom that took you
Mm,
to every practice since you were 5 years old? It's so interesting.
a hundred percent.
It's so interesting. So with the Brink, are you going to make a movie, do you think? What do you think is going to happen with that? I'm kind of interested.
Well,
Because you're a
my
producer too, aren't you? Because
yes.
I did read your bio. So you are a producer. So is this something you're interested in delving into?
I very much am. I actually already have a script based on the main story of the book, the most intense part of it. And so I wrote that script, but I think it's further down the road in my producing journey. It's also called The Brink. But it includes animation, like it would be a major budget production. I have another film I wrote that's based on a true crime story from a kid in my high school. It's the first thing. It's I'm so proud of it. It's called Hardcore because he was in the hardcore punk scene, and he did some crazy, awful thing. And I can't believe I've never seen it on Dateline or anything. So I'm really psyched about that, and I'm shopping that now. That's a seems like an easier thing to get off the ground because true crime's so big right now. And I'm most proud of, it's the first thing I wrote that's not about me. Like I wrote a play about my life. I wrote this book about my life. I wrote the movie Division that I put out in March is based on my life with a, kind of a fantasy aspect to it. So I'm like just so excited. I got outside of myself and got passionate about this other story.
I love that. And so you've mentioned a couple times your mental illness. And I
Mhm.
think that, as we all know, that addiction and alcoholism and all of it falls underneath mental health, right? So does
Mhm.
schizophrenia, so does bipolar. It's a lot of things that go under this one umbrella for the insurance company. I don't know how they're really dealing with that. That I could go on a tangent
You
about.
nailed it. Yeah, really.
Yeah. It's
Same
a,
here. It's
yeah,
infuriating.
it's insane. It's insane. And I find it so hard for people to get good therapists, good
Mhm.
diagnoses, good medications, and not be just being feel like you're going to a drug dealer for one that's actually a legalized drug dealer, or two, you're going to a therapist that's just like put up their little sign outside of their home or wherever it is online and say, I'm a therapist because I went to school for da 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 times.
Mhm.
And a lot of times they're not qualified, fortunately or unfortunately. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I always refer to my mental health odyssey because I've seen some terrible people. That's detailed in the book too. Like I didn't see anyone decent until I was 18, 19 years old. And it opened up the doors for me. Because other than that, if people are just doing, what, like you said, they're just going to school, they don't have any real world practical applications. They're holding you up next to a book and saying, oh, I think you're this. They're asking the things like, do you think of harming yourself? You know, did you do any drugs? Like just these questions that aren't getting to the bottom of it. They're the surface level of what the issue is. Um, and I found them even more harmful than they were helpful. Um, what's actually made a big I finally got on a medication that was good for me about 10 years ago. Uh, I wish I could get off it now because I feel fine, but they're like, you feel fine because you're on the medicine. um, so I think people have to find what works for them. Like my medication is non narcotic. I think it's dangerous when they put people on Xanax and stuff. That's a really bad idea. But what has also really helped, it wasn't until like a year and a half ago I did hypnotherapy, because all the therapy I'd done in my life, I couldn't break the cyclical thoughts of being mean to myself and the worry. And I went kicking and screaming the whole way. I didn't even believe in it. Like halfway through, it was like a 12-week program. Halfway through, I'm like, this isn't working, give me my money back. And she is like, I can't give you my money back. I'm like, well, then I guess I better finish it. She knew exactly what she was doing.
Wow.
Because it has changed my mindset to bring up miracles again, it miraculously. um I, instead of saying mean things to myself, like even if I'm like, oh, I'm a dummy, I'm like, you did something silly, that's fine. you know it's just made life so much better, and seeing the positives instead of the negatives in the world. And it impacts every way you go about your life in the world, it impacts all the people around you. Like, I used to hate talking to customer service people, and I felt like I was always getting in fights with them. And it's because you were bringing negativity, you know? Now I talked to this Amazon guy the other day. We were cracking up. Like, there's so much joy to be found in the world. You know, not everyone's open to it, but when you find those receivers and can share joy with another person, I mean, I think that's what we're here for. And like, not only helping people, like you said, but, you know, sharing the magic and joy of this world that we're in.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, when I was here looking down, I always make notes when I hear somebody talking because I don't want to forget what I was going to say to you. So
Mhm.
I think like the fact being that you're an actress and it's very glamorous, right? It's very sexy, your job. And I mean, I know you're from the outside, okay?
Sure, right.
As somebody who's like someone who's like, oh my gosh, watching and watching and watching, society wants to treat us like robots in a lot of ways, right? It's been such, like, oh, you're going to get sober, you're going to do this one way until now, right? Mental health, you're going to only go this one way. Now there's a plethora of things that you can do.
Yeah.
What is your advice to somebody who's out there so they don't have to feel they're like, this talk therapy isn't working for me? And how do I get out of this? And what do I do? What is your advice to them? Because they know it's not working for them, but they don't know what to do.
Well, with talk therapy, I certainly ran on a hamster wheel of talk therapy for so long. So I understand it not working for you. Then it's maybe you got to find another person, which I think the good ones are needle in a haystack, but try whatever it takes, self-help books. You know, you have to really look if you want to change, if you're tired of feeling the way you're feeling, you've got to search out what works for you. For me, it was definitely hypnotherapy. And it was, you know, there were all these free self-help courses on YouTube, on and everywhere on the internet. You can find what speaks to you, but it may take a lot of looking because we're all individuals. The same thing isn't going to work for the same people. But like my friend that's staying with us, she is kind of going through a tough time. And so and she's younger than me. And I have tried to give her my hypnotherapy tapes. Like, just do this. I understand we're all a little in love with our sadness. I know I was. Uh-oh, the mouth dropped open. um, because when it's all you know, in some way it's a comfort. And I know it's ridiculous because it's so uncomfortable. So for me, it took to my 40s when I was like, I am tired of feeling this way. I'm doing whatever it takes to change it. And for me, that was hypnotherapy. What it'll be for you, I don't know. But like, you have to, it's just like addiction. You have to be ready to want to change.
Well, and isn't it's been very cathartic, I would think, that people they say journaling is so important to getting those feelings out. And the fact
Hmm.
that you've been writing, and I'm sure that story of the boy in your class, I'm sure that's been haunting you in some ways. You're like, why is this he obviously affected you in such a way that you're like, I have to do this for his memory because if we don't, what was he just another statistic, right? Instead of being a real person.
Um, it, I'm not sure who you mean, my sister, or I don't
No,
remember Boyd.
the who you're writing the story about in high school, the tragedy that happened in your high school, the true crime you just said?
Oh, that didn't happen until after high school.
Oh, okay, okay, I
Um,
misunderstood, but I would imagine that writing that, like, whatever that story that brought that
right.
to you was
Sorry.
cathartic. Oh, no worries, no worries. I went back to when you were talking about that, how
Yes.
you've written that.
Yes.
that
I thought you meant in the book. I worry that that wasn't cathartic. It was exploitative because it's just such a shocking story. And I think it would be impactful in that way because that is, in fact, about mental health and the quality of mental health care in this country. So you actually nailed it. And I apologize, I lost the thread,
No
but
worries, no worries.
you nailed it. No, because he was getting inferior mental health care. He had a medication appointment. They wouldn't give him more medication till he had an appointment. he had an appointment the next day, and what he did the day before, he was only off of it for 3 days, and a literal nightmare occurred. So yeah, my hope is that, I mean, how do you wake up the whole country? How do you wake up the powers that be and say, we really, they all say whenever there's a shooting, it's the mental health care in this country. Well, do something about it. If you're not going to do something about the guns, do something about the mental health, because they say that every time, but they don't do anything to change it.
No, I think it's so and just so frustrating and so painful for so many that are out there. And I think that locking people in their homes as they did during COVID was not a benefit. It was definitely destructive to the human mind, because we're supposed to be with other people. I mean, let's
Yeah.
face it, God made, if you believe in this, which I do, he's got Adam, then he took the rib and made Eve, and he's like, okay, now there's billions of other people. So we need each other, right? We need
Yes.
each other to bring each other up. And if we have people that are out there that are sick and feeling alone, and having those voices, like you mentioned, that are saying, I'm no good, I'm a loser, and then you end up hurting yourself, and you get to this place where maybe you're in so much pain, you want to hurt others, and you pick up whatever you find in your house, or you go get it down at some store, whatever it is, and you go and you hurt people at other places. Hurt people. Don't you agree?
Yes. Yes. And I feel especially bad for children who had to grow up in those circumstances. But yeah, what did they say? Drug use and suicide spiked when we were all stuck inside alone. But some people don't need COVID. I spent a long time, almost a decade, isolating myself and keeping myself in my home just because I couldn't deal with the outside world anymore. So sometimes you don't need a governmental decree to to isolate yourself. I think a lot of people, whether it's social anxiety, whether it's their addiction, um, have really collapsed inside themselves. And the answer for me absolutely was getting outside yourself, connecting with other people, not telling everyone all your problems, listening to theirs, be a friend to have a friend. Um, yeah, I think you're absolutely right that our connection with other people is absolutely a necessity for existence.
Well, it's interesting that you said that you wish that they would do something to change this that's going on. And ironically, isn't it that you wrote the book on the brink of disaster? You're shining a flashlight and showing people, this is what it was like for me.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's saying you don't have to do this by yourself, and you don't have to have the outcome that you had. You don't have to walk through it as long as I did. You can actually reach out and get help, and they can reach out to you.
Oh, absolutely. I would be happy to talk to anyone that's going through what I went through, or could be different for everybody. Um, but it's funny with being locked inside for COVID. I was in this day job because I'd moved to Atlanta, and so it took a while to get a foot in the acting industry here. So I took this day job. I was so miserable. I hadn't had a day job in like 13 years. So so COVID actually, they let me go. I mean, I think they wanted to anyway, and that was a good excuse. Um, I got let go. I became, for some reason, being forced in my house did a lot of good for me. Like, I wasn't going to the gym anymore, but I was exercising every day for an hour. I was reading all these books. I wrote my movie Division, and wound up producing that while still under COVID guidelines. So I know it was awful for a lot of people, but it's very strange. It really did wonders for me. Is that awful?
No, I mean, that's the
I'm
whole thing.
sorry, people died. That's the
I know. Well,
oh God.
I think that it's, we all have our journeys.
Yes.
And is there really so much of, like, the world wants us to be right and wrong, good or bad? and there's this we got to do it because they say we have to do it, and that's this round table somewhere in the world which doesn't even freaking exist, I don't think. But I think there might be one person up there, but that might be it, who knows. But whatever you want to believe is good for you and is good for me. But I think that it's learning to live in that color that's in between those black and the whites, right? And when you mentioned I love sadness, and so much sadness. I don't watch the news because I can't do anything about it really. So let's be honest. I just because
Mhm.
it does tend to take you down this fear, this rabbit hole that just is not beneficial for anyone.
Oh,
Let's
yeah,
just
for
face it.
sure.
It's like I'd rather just put on some music that I love and go dance around the house than listen to what they have to say on the news,
Yeah.
or be entertained like you are. You're an entertainer. That's what you do for a living. So when someone's out there and they say, I understand like that pity party and that sadness and like that inability to get out of the darkness. And there is so much darkness, I think, in the world today. How do you tell somebody to find joy? What is your ways of finding joy in your life?
Uh, well, gosh, I know so much of it has been said before, but gratitude, um, being grateful is huge. Um, there's a thing in hypnotherapy, it's also in DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, called turning the mind. Like when you have a negative thought, say the opposite. At first, you'll be like, yuck, I don't believe that. But you have to keep doing it. It's like a pattern interrupt. Um, then it's little things, be in nature. They like, look at those trees, look at the leaves changing. Or like, look at this puppy. How can you
Oh,
not find joy in the puppy? Oh my gosh. Um, just focusing, it's a shame because it all sounds pedantic, because we've heard it all before, but hearing it and really listening to it are different things. Um, Finding the positives, you have to. Even I made this phrase to because I try and tell it to my husband. My husband can get very uptight about stuff. And I'm like, cultivate softness.
I love that.
Yes, it helps to cultivate softness. Like instead of being like, why are they making us do these 2 pages of sides for an audition or something? They are. That's it. Just do them. It's like, what's the point of getting upset? Acceptance is
Acceptance is
and
huge.
there's the serenity prayer for you. It's so good that it's you can't just say the words. You've got to really feel them and embrace them and bring them into your life.
Well, it's so crazy because I just said that I just wrote down born forgetter, because I do think that doing this every day is important, because if we do it, life gets better, right? It's kind of like your medication. You know that it's been working, but of course you're like, but I don't want to take this. I want to be healthy. I don't want to have this medication in my body, but you know it works. And it's just like the gratitude and the acceptance. We forget to do it in the day.
Hmm. Yeah, life catches up to you. You're busy with what you're especially busy with what you've got going on. It's easy to lose sight of the little things that bring life joy.
Yeah, it truly is. Well, I have to tell you, thank you so much for coming on and for talking to us. And where can people find your book? I know I'm going to have all the links when you go and you read my description. It's going to have everything on there. So way people can reach you, they can get to your website, they can get to everything you sent me. I'm going to send that all in my description.
Awesome.
And so do you have any words, anything else you want to tell us today before we go?
Just hang in there. Things got really dark for me, and now they almost couldn't be any lighter. There is hope. You can change your life. You can enjoy your life. Trust.
Oh my
Hope is
gosh.
out there.
Hope is out there, and you should okay, by the way, if you're just listening to this, everybody, and you're not watching this on YouTube or on my website, you have to see Jamie's face. It is like, for one, the light is coming in at this angle that you just look gorgeous. You're beaming and you're so happy and authentic, and I love it. I'm sending you humongous hugs through the computer. I'm so excited for you. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for being transparent. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being you.
Thank you so much, Busy. You're lovely to speak with. I want to hug you now.
We're hugging. We're hugging. Oh my gosh. It's been such a pleasure. I'll have to reach out to you when I'm in Atlanta in December. I will totally reach out to you.
Please.
And if you're listening, guys, please subscribe to my show, subscribe to my channel, go and check out elizabethchance.com. You can subscribe to my newsletter, and then every episode will go right into your inbox. But again, thank you again, Jaime Andrews. Everybody go out there, read Brink. If you're on the brink of disaster, go. There she is. So excited you brought that up. I wanted to have it to show it. I was like, where is it? I don't have a copy. But it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much. And stay healthy and safe in these crazy days that we're in, okay? I'll see you in December.
Thank you, Busy. Sounds great.
So much.